Documents relating to the prosecution of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn were unsealed Wednesday. That includes handwritten notes from his interview with the FBI. The retired lieutenant general pleaded guilty in December to lying to the agency. Afterwards, Attorney General William Barr ordered a probe into the handling of the case. In a court filing last week, Flynn's attorney claimed the unsealed documents prove the FBI suppressed evidence. CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge has been poring over those documents, and she joins me now. Welcome, Catherine. First off, could you remind us of the backstory of General Flynn's case and how we got here?
Sure, Tanya, it's great to be with you this evening. I haven't seen you for a while, so it is good to be a part of the conversation again. So General Flynn was the National Security Advisor for then candidate Trump, and then he transitioned to be the National Security Advisor for a very limited period at the start of the administration. It was about a month. He resigned, and he ultimately pled guilty to lying to FBI investigators about his contacts with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. And over the next 3 years, there's been this tension between whether Flynn would be sentenced to prison time for a violation of what's called 18 U.S.C. 1001, so lying to federal agents. But then sort of the twist and turn in this is that General Flynn sought to withdraw his plea on the basis that he didn't have all of the evidence that the government was required to provide to his defense team. And then he also alleged that he was pressured into this guilty plea in part because he was trying to shield or protect his son from prosecution. And we're where we are today because Attorney General Bill Barr tasked a U.S. attorney outside of Washington, D.C. to do a review of the Flynn criminal case and to specifically look at whether the government had met what's called their Brady requirements. So the government had provided all the records to Flynn that might be helpful in his defense. And in the last few days, some of these records have now been presented to a federal court. And as you mentioned on Wednesday, they were just unsealed, and we're learning new things about this Flynn interview with the FBI on January 24th, 2017.
And how did these records come to be unsealed, and how significant are they, Catherine?
Well, it really began a couple of months ago when this U.S. attorney, Jeffrey Jensen, in the Eastern District of Missouri, was directed by the Attorney General to go back and look at the Flynn case to see if records may be helpful to Flynn that had not been provided. And what you're seeing right now is a transcript of what I think is the most newsworthy element of these records, and it's these handwritten notes. They're so faded, they're very hard to read, and based on the court record today, they've been enhanced so people could develop a transcript. And based on the notations, these notes were taken on the same day that General Flynn was interviewed by the FBI. And the part of those notes, Tanya, that's going to get the most attention is a section that comes under the heading of afterwards. And it says, what is our goal? Truth, admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired? And we don't know who the author is of these notes, but that's pretty loaded language from people within the FBI whose job it was at that time to investigate whether Flynn had lied about these contacts with the Russian ambassador.
Indeed. So, Catherine, what does all this mean politically then?
Right. You know, it seems like it's sort of way down the rabbit hole in a lot of ways because of the detail. But what these documents at least suggest is that there was a discussion among senior people within the FBI about what their objective was in the Flynn case. Was it to investigate and ultimately find the facts of what happened, or as these records say, to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired? And Flynn is trying to withdraw his guilty plea at this time, so this would be evidence that would be supportive of his position that he didn't have all the records in front of him and make that knowledgeable decision to plead guilty. But I think there's also a broader audience here which is the President of the United States. And if you've been following the Twitter traffic, he's certainly very engaged. And I sort of say that in the most conservative of terms. He's very engaged on the subject and what he would ultimately see as maybe more evidence that Flynn should ultimately be pardoned. But that's just speculation on my part, but it certainly raises that question.
Right, that was going to be my next question to you, as to whether these new records seem to increase that likelihood that perhaps President Trump could end up pardoning General Flynn. I guess, again, like you said, we have no idea what the president's intentions are, but would it seem to weigh the balance a little bit towards that side?
Well, what I can say is that the records that were unsealed on Wednesday, discussing whether the objective was finding the truth or creating a scenario where he could be fired or prosecuted, this is just the beginning. Based on my reporting here at CBS News, I understand that more records are now being presented to the federal court. They will also be under seal, and we'll see a similar process where there is an effort to unseal these records. And I don't think you can draw too sharp a line under this point in particular, which is that the Justice Department and the Attorney General sided with Flynn's defense team and agreed that these records should be public so that the American people could weigh them for themselves. So that's unusual when you have two adversarial parties agreeing to unseal records that could be very helpful to the defendant. And based on my reporting, the Attorney General, with the tasking to the U.S. Attorney in Missouri, and now the unsealing of these records, has really been a driving force behind this, and more records are to come.
Right. Well, it certainly seems, at least in small baby steps, things may be going in General Flynn's way, in his direction. All right. Well, Catherine Herridge, thank you so much for joining us. Really fascinating stuff and great reporting, as always, that you do. Thank you so much.
Of course.